Hi everybody, welcome along to episode 115 of Percussion Discussion. As usual, I'm going to ask you to check out all of our social media. You can find us on Facebook, Instagram, and our world famous YouTube channel where you can hear and see all of our conversations, past and present. If you wouldn't mind subscribing, it really helps us. If you'd rather listen on the go, then this is no problem. All of our conversations are available in podcast form. These are free to download from your favorite podcast provider. If you can please rate and review, it helps like-minded drummers find us and hopefully like us as much as you do. So if you could do that, really appreciate it. On to today's guest, a guy who's done a ridiculous amount of work, still a young guy. He's recently had a really big feature in Modern Drummer this month. In fact, he's been playing for the mighty Ed Sheeran for 11 years now. He's in fact in the middle of a US stadium tour. He's actually gigging tonight. That won't make any sense if you're watching this in, well, any time after today, but hey, but you get the size of the gig he's on. It's a big one. He's done so much recording for film soundtracks, including Rocketman, the Elton John biopic, and many other different artists, Tom Jones. The list goes on and on. So it gives me great pleasure to welcome the wonderful Mark Pusey. Mark, thanks so much for doing this, mate. It's really kind of you.
You're very, very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Oh, it's a pleasure. I know you're an incredibly busy guy. We've sort of been back and forth a little bit, and we had a false alarm the other day, didn't we? But we're here now, and we're ready to go.
Yeah. Thanks again. Thanks as well for your patience. It's taken a few months, isn't it? But we've been juggling lives, haven't we?
I really appreciate it. And first of all, I have to say congratulations on the Modern Drummer feature. It's quite a big feature you've had in there as well, isn't it?
Yeah, it was proper. Like, I mean, I put a post up on social media, like saying that I used to do a paper round, and the only reason I did a paper round was so that I could buy music, like buy CDs and tapes, and buy Modern Drummer. That was it. Yeah. I just wanted to. My first issue, I think, was 1995, and Denny Fongheiser was on the cover, and Denny played on.
The Chicago.
No, that's so Denny had just done Tracy Chapman, the Tracy Chapman album, with like Fast Car and Sub City and all those sorts of songs on, and it was huge. The album came out, it was really successful, and Denny had been doing a bunch of stuff in the studio sort of around the year before that had been released in 95, and I remember reading it and going, oh, this is what I want. This is so cool. This is absolutely brilliant. And I still have that magazine, and I had a subscription and all that stuff. The W.H. Smiths around the corner from us used to, keep it in, and I used to be the annoying kid. You'd be like, "Is my magazine in yet?" And you're like, "No, come back tomorrow." "Is my magazine in yet?" "No, come back tomorrow." And so it's, it's like it made me very, very happy. Put it that way. My mum.
I can't imagine. It's a huge achievement, isn't it? Obviously we had Rhythm magazine for many years over here, as you'll know. I'm sure you've probably been in that at some point or other. I can't remember. I've probably read them all at some point, but
yeah, just before it finished, really sadly, because I mean, I remember like Louise, who was the editor, and before her, Ronan and all those guys. Again, that was another one that I used to read and just take all the exercises and stuff from the back and try and apply them. And, I'd take the issues into my drum teacher and be like, "Hey, what drum's this?" And why, that was, I mean, now it's all on YouTube, but God, I'm aware that I sound old, but back in the old days,
with you.
No, back in the old days, that used to be how, it was a thing. And they would list clinics in those magazines and say, like, this guy's coming to town, before you could go on social media or you had Facebook or anything like that, or this guy's coming to town to do a clinic tour, and he'll be here and they'll be there, and that's how it used to happen. And so to be in that magazine in particular, I did Rhythm and Drummer and a bunch of other mags which are all utterly fantastic, but that one sort of was always the pinnacle, and to have a feature, and it was really lovely. Yeah. And a really good interview as well. The guy Bob Giroud, who's I'm going to meet when we go to New York. He's a wonderful guy, very, very enthusiastic drum geek.
Well, congratulations. It is a great achievement. And I only read it from, I tried to zoom in on on your Facebook page.
Right.
Quite hard to do when you're my age. It's like, oh, get the glasses out. But fabulous, great interview, as you said, and quite in depth. Some great photos as well, which is always makes. I mean, we used to read Rhythm Magazine and Drummer, and without the photos, it was kind of nothing, wasn't it? Really, you like to kind of have a reference to. Oh, I see what he's talking about there, and they're always great photos in modern drummer. They really are.
Yeah. Well, it gives perspective as well. When you see people play, you can hear about people tell you stuff and until they're blue in the face, but when you sort of see it happen in front of you, or you see pictures or video of it, it all of a sudden kind of makes a bit more sense. That it brings it to life a little bit. Yeah,
of course. Well, at the moment you are in. I think are you in Atlanta? In your hotel in Atlanta?
Yeah, obviously, in Atlanta,
touring with the mighty Ed Sheeran. Now. We were talking just before we started recording, and I didn't realize that obviously we see the huge arenas and stadiums that you're playing in, but you mentioned that you were doing some more intimate gigs as well before the big shows. Now, can you tell us a little bit about that? Because I find this really fascinating.
Yeah. So Ed's machine, if you like, the world of Ed Sheeran is he's wildly popular. And it's a stadium tour. So in sort of we did Wembley in the United Kingdom, among other stadiums, and we did the MCG in Australia, among other stadiums. And those are the sort of big the MCG is 117,000 people a night, which is, I think the O2 is like 17,000. So that's 10 nights at the O2 in one sitting, and we did 2 of them. So 20 shows in 2 days. If you can imagine the scale of these shows, sort of 20 times the size of the O2 over those 2 days. So they're massive shows, because his catalogue is huge, and he has these massive tunes that people want to come out and listen to and dance to and have real meaning in their lives. But recently, in the last couple of years, he's been going through a few bits. He lost somebody very close to him. His wife was poorly. There was some struggles, some personal struggles, and he finds writing very cathartic, and he did that, and it came out in the shape of an album called Subtract. So in the mathematics thing, he's had plus, divide, multiply, and this one's subtract. So it's really stripped down and really, really quiet and intimate. In fact, there are some songs there are barely any drums in, and they don't really translate. Those songs, that material doesn't really translate so well to the stadium. So in each city, before the run of stadium shows, so sometimes we do, like the one in New York, we're doing a couple. We did the MetLife in the Sophie Stadium, the new big one in LA. We do this for a couple of nights. But before each run of stadium shows in that city, we do a tiny little show, like an intimate show. I say it's tiny. I mean, they're the size of sort of Hammersmith Apollo, just to give you 2,000 to 3,000 people, just to give some perspective. Sure. But tiny in relation to the stadiums we did the next day. And he can just play the album in a really intimate setting, where they're almost like listening sessions. The audience are quieter, the audience are more engaged, and more, rather than being out at a gig, they come to listen to him tell these stories and pour his heart out. And then the second half is, play some upbeat stuff to try and get people out of their funk. But each show comes with its pros and cons. But these smaller theatre shows I absolutely love, because I love the music, and I love seeing the whites of people's eyes, and I love being 3.5 feet away from the rest of the band on a stage playing together. There's in the stadium shows and in these smaller shows, there are no click tracks. There's no click, there's no track, there's no nothing. Wow. So if Ed wants to go a little faster one day, he'll start a song a little faster, or he'll turn around to me and go, "Let's go, come on." Or if he's like, "Guys, you know what? I'm just going to do this one on my own," and we'll just sit there and listen and watch. And somebody from the audience, as it happens, will shout out, "Oh, play Lego House," and I'll go, "All right, Mark, can you count it off?" Okay, cool. If you were doing a show to track or a show to click that was the same every night, you wouldn't be able to do that sort of thing. And, if he wants the audience to sing along, he'll stop and drums will carry on and bass will carry on and go, guys, let's sing around this. It gives you that freedom to do that stuff. It's also an inordinate amount of pressure on the drummer, but it's great. It's really fun.
So the music can breathe. It's got a life of its own, hasn't it? Rather than I know tracks are a valid thing these days and an important thing for a lot of, if you literally can't recreate the tracks, you've got to have these things. But to have a band that breathes and moves is a lovely thing to see, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. We try to bridge the gap. Like, I've got electronics on my rig, and we all sing. So there's five musicians. There's drums, bass, 2 guitars, pianos, keys, and then Ed. So between the 6 of us, we make a pretty decent noise, and we're all singing. All 6 of us are singing. So there's lots of backup vocals, lots of warmth, lots of support. And in these smaller shows, in addition to that, there's a string section as well. So it recreates, some of the strings on the album. That doesn't really translate so well to stadiums. So we don't take the string section out to the stadiums, but we're having them we're having them on these smaller shows.
Lovely. And tell me, do you you're playing, I mean, as in your drumming, do you have to change it much from the intimate shows to the stadiums? Do you find you have to change things slightly?
Utterly.
Yeah.
It's the gigs are like in playing terms. I think the gigs are chalk and cheese, because the smaller show is very dynamic. It's not quite as dynamic as a studio job, because every little nuance isn't picked up. You try as hard as you can, but when the sound is rattling around a room, you can't pick that. You can't pick out every little intricacy, but they're incredibly dynamic. Some of the songs I'm playing with my hands, I play with brushes, I play with roots, I play with these Vic Firth broomstick sticks. We've got proper sticks, got different kind of sticks I'm using on some tunes. These new Russ Miller Vic Firth sticks with a tiny little bead, so there's hyper definition on the cymbals. Sometimes I just use standard 5Bs, so the sound really matters. The articulation and the art lies in the detail, and it's very dynamic, very articulate. In stadium shows, all of that goes entirely out the window. You're playing to anybody who's ever been inside a stadium to watch a football event or a concert or anything like that, they're not built for sound. They really aren't. I mean, even if Wembley Stadium is a sports, or is a live venue, an entertainment venue for sport and music, but it wasn't built for sound. The sound just rattles around there. There's 300 and something speakers, and the way the stage is set up is, if you've seen any pictures of it online, Ed is on a circular stage in the middle, and above that is a big halo video screen that circles the whole stage, and that goes up and down, and it goes up and down on pulleys that are held by these massive, great big pylons. And at the base of each one of these pylons, sort of in the audience facing the stage, at the bottom of each one of these pylons is a band member. So we're not even on the same stages. Wow. So Ed's stage goes around and around, and then up and down, and this halo goes up and down above all that, and then he's sort of looking out at us, we're looking out in at him, and the sound is basically all hung above the main stage, and of course we're looking directly at that main stage. So I'm playing my snare drum, it's coming into it's the physical sound I can feel and hear from outside, it's coming into my ears a millisecond later, and then I hear it coming out of the main speakers in front of me, and then I hear it reverberating around the stadium 4 or 5 or 6 times. So in that thing, it's really about meat and potatoes and solid consistency and keeping it strong, keeping the parts faithful to how they sound in the record, or faithful to how we've how they've changed over the years. But really, it's about keeping it solid, keeping it strong, fewer ghost notes, certainly less dynamic, because the quiet stuff just doesn't translate. It sounds like when you've got one bang snare drum that you're actually hearing 8 times. You know, imagine putting 6 ghost notes in that same bar. Well, those ghost notes are just going to just end up sounding like mush.
Yeah.
So you have to be really, you change your playing significantly. The stadium playing is more muscular because there are gates on the drums. So everything, you know, so the sound coming out the speakers doesn't bleed back into the drums, and you just end up with this horrible feedback loop. So yeah, the drumming in the stadiums is far more muscular, far less dynamic, far more physically demanding. But the theatre shows, conversely, are more dynamic and more intricate, if you like.
So even I talk a lot about monitoring because it's kind of a subject that kind of gets overlooked a little bit. You know, when drummers are talking on these things, you know, there's loads of drummy things, but monitoring is one of the most important things you'll ever have. So even in an arena, even with the standard of in-ears and all the Porter and Davis stuff, I'm not suggesting you do. I don't know if you have that or not, but either way, you know, you even with these great fitting molded in-ears, you can still hear, you know, things coming from front of house and like rattling around. You still get that.
Yeah. So when I'm on my drums, it goes up to 100, sort of around 100 decibels. I've got an Apple Watch, and it sends me these alerts saying, you're in a room and there's 100 decibels. You should watch your hearing. But the you know, the PA in the stadium is like 110 decibels.
Right.
So it's an inordinate amount of noise. And the only physical possible seal you can get on your ears is something around 26, 28 dB. Okay. If you put your fingers in your ears, or you're wearing they're only rated up to around 26 dB. So there's all that extraneous noise that you're still hearing. It doesn't matter that you've got in-ears in. And so monitoring is incredibly important to focus in on what you need to hear. You know, as drummers, you know, you do festivals or sort of gigs where you've got a second to get the sound together before you're going on stage, and you get sort of survival mix, right? So for us, there's no click or track. Normally it would be, I need to hear click, I need to hear track. If I don't hear anybody else, I know how these songs go. I'll just shut my eyes and I'll get to the end and hope that everybody can hear me. On theirs, it's entirely different. I need to be able to hear Ed's guitar. If Ed's in a certain, because there's no click or track, if Ed, you know, is excited or is feeling is just in a different place physically, mentally, in terms of energy, in terms of how he wants to sing the song, I need to be able to dial in on his guitar and follow it. The show is about, nobody's come to see us at all. That, you know, nobody ever come, you know, maybe your friends or your parents or something will come to see you at a show. Everybody is there to see Ed. And your job is to make him look and sound good. And if you can't hear him, then that's going to be a struggle. Do you know what I mean? So really, in terms of monitoring, it's vastly important, but really the most important is being able to hear him, because to all intents and purposes, he's the one who sets the agenda for how that song's going to go.
Amazing. Well, obviously, I wouldn't mind it if you can run us through what happens on a stadium gig, because, you know, probably 0.0001% of us will be lucky enough to play one, you know, in our lifetimes. I know I haven't and probably never will. So run us through kind of what happens. Obviously, you leave your hotel, you get to the stadium. What time would you kind of arrive to have a sound check and get comfortable? And just talk us through how the night works, you know, the day works before you get on stage, because I always find this fascinating.
So we have it varies for a lot of the time, but you know, Ed has a lot of collaborations with different artists. So on this gig, Khalid, who he's done a song with, is performing a song with him. So we had to learn that. You know, we've had guests in the past like Sam Smith and Stormzy and Anne Marie and all these people, Taylor Swift and Justin Bieber. They've all written songs with him, and you know, we'll come on and we'll sing and perform with him. So if that happens, if it's one of those days, we have to get there early. But for the most part, we get to the stadium around 2:00 or 1:30, 2:00, have something to eat, go in, do a sound check. Just because every stadium's different, they need to sort of calibrate the speakers, you know, do system tech stuff, all that sort of thing. And then we finish. I invariably come back and use the time between the sound check and the gig to go to the gym, hang out, get in correspondence, call family, that sort of thing. And then we go back about sort of 6:30, something like that. Maybe watch a bit of the support act, have something to eat, or have a chat about the gigs, sort out a set list, because they're very nebulous. You know, because there's no click and track, they change a lot. Yeah. So one night we'll play something, the next night we'll play something else. The other week it rained, and Ed has a song called "Can't Stop the Rain." Mm-hmm. So we were like, do you know what? It might rain, and Ed might turn around and go, "Mark, play Can't Stop," start the song. And you see, you've got to kind of be on your toes the whole time. So we'll have a chat about what's likely to get played. We'll get a rough set list, and Ed will either stick to it or not. And then we go out and we play. And then we finish playing, and we come back to the hotel, or maybe stay and hang, have a drink, or maybe go to a bar or something. But it's not a wildly rock and roll tour in terms of the fact that we finish a gig, that we go and go in the town and get leathered. We actually went out last night, but in the 3.5 weeks of being in the United States, that's the first night after a gig where we've gone, let's all go out for a bit, because we're with each other all day every day. So
you're looking very fresh-faced anyway, Mark, if that helps.
All right. Well. Yeah. I don't really drink, to be honest. I mean, I have a pint or two, or whatever, and just But I'm just not a very good. I'm not a very good drinker. I'm around some very, very professional drinkers, and I'm just not one of them. So I'll have a couple and then quit a night.
Yeah, it kind of goes with the territory, doesn't it? The drinking side of things. Musicians, beer, it's kind of hand in hand, isn't it? But
yeah. I like one. I'm just not good at more than a few.
Well, hey, it's a social thing, isn't it? And
absolutely,
really interesting and a wonderful gig to have, which you've done for a long time, haven't you? So it's it must be.
So about
go on, carry.
No, about 11 years, or 11 or 12 years, something like that. It was like in February 2012, so 11 years. The first gig was a live lounge. Wow. Me, my buddy Chris, John, who's still on the gig, who plays bass now, and Ed. We did a Radio 1 live lounge, and that was the first thing. So Ed normally, or has previously, toured on his own. Mm-hmm. So he does this loop pedal thing. So he basically plays drums on his guitar, loops it, plays a bit of rhythm, loops it, plays a lead line, loops it, and then sings over the top of all that. And when he's launched albums, there'll be promotion. So you'll go and do the Graham Norton show or something, and Ed will not mime. He just won't mime. He'd be like, just play the music video. I'm not going to show up and I'll just play it. I want to play it. So all those we do live, like the Jules Hollands and and all over Europe, he will have an album out and he'll have 3 minutes, 30 seconds to play the track exactly like it is on the album, so people can enjoy it enough to buy it. And then when they come out to the tour, he might do it on his own, or he'll do a version of it. But really, for the most part, we'll do 3 to 6 months of promo on an album. So over the years, every time he's released an album, we'll see him for a couple of months when he promotes it, and we'll do MTV awards and all this sort of stuff. And then there'll be 2 years where he'll go out and do a tour, but on his own. This is the first tour. He was like, I need to sort of level up, and there are no arenas, there are no they're all stadiums, and it needs to be a huge show. It needs to be big. And he's always wanted, he's always called and said before he's going out on the tour, I'm going to take a band and get ready because I need you. We're going to come, we're going to play some drums and it's going to be great. And then you think, okay, cool. Well, that's amazing. And what an honor, what a pleasure. And then it gets to a couple of weeks before and you're like, this isn't happening, is it? And that's cool. That's fine. And then, you see pictures of like, oh, there's the first date. And you're like, oh, okay, well, maybe, for whatever reason, it's been decided against. But this time it was like, yeah, I want to use you, use a band for this one because it needs to level up. And it happened this time. So
amazing.
Here we are.
I mean, from personal point of view, I I would much rather see a band. It's more of a spectacle. It's more to hear and see, and it's the whole thing, you know. Even with a guy as talented as Ed is, I'd still rather see a band. I know he can do it on his own, but for me personally, you know, I want to see a drum kit up there. I want to hear it. I want my fillings to fall out when they hit the bass drum, you know.
Yeah, well, that's exactly the same here. And you know, his fans are very dedicated, and you know, real super fans for the most part. They've seen him do that, you know, for years and years and years, and he was reticent, I think, rightly so, because that's his brand and that's how he's gigged, and people have bought his stuff and supported him in that manner, in that sort of setup. So it's always wary, if it ain't broke, don't fix it kind of thing. But we play for about 70% of the show now, maybe 60%. But again, it varies because he'll change the set or whatever, and I'll go, guys, I'm going to do this one on my own, or we'll be sort of side of stage and we'll go like, guys, I'm going to bring them back. Come on, we're going to play this one now, you know, and we'll play a different song with band. So he still does do the loop stuff on his own. It's just now it also levels up. There's a band on some stuff, and some of the stuff we've tried, and the song Sing, his song Sing, we've done it a bunch of times. We did it for Radio 1's Big Weekend. We did it on live lounges. We've done it on TVs and all the rest of it. And to me, it's always sounded a little bit sterile. Not sterile, but a little bit session, a little bit perfect and smooth, and a little bit too clinical and too good and too clean. And it's kind of like a football chant, like oh, 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 and we're singing it, and it sounds like a really beautiful, amazing choir, and it needs to sound like a raucous football crowd. And so Ed does that on his own using a loop pedal, and recreates it the same way that he recreated it on the album, and it sounds banging. It sounds absolutely banging. But then there are songs like Thinking Out Loud, which you know, it needs a band on that one. It brings a warmth. It's like a warm hug around him for that sort of thing. So there are certain songs that I actually think sound better on the loop pedal, because otherwise they're a bit too clean, a bit too clinical, and other ones that I think, oh, this really benefits from having a band in.
So you do still get those dynamics, although not in your own. You can't do it individually, but you still get the overall dynamic, which is nice. The light and shade.
Absolutely, exactly that. Yeah, there's light and shade. There's ebb and flow in the gig. It's not just all exactly the same. It's just from a playing side, you have to be a bit more straight down the line, as opposed to intricate detail.
Of course. Well, look, if you don't mind, let's go back to kind of where it all caught fire for you, because it always fascinates me. Everyone has a different journey into drums and music. So what's kind of your first memories of music, if you like, before we get to drums, unless it is drums, of course?
Yeah, well, I mean, so my folks aren't musical insofar as they don't play instruments, but radio was always on. We'd listen to music in the car, and it was a musical household. My brother played guitar. I think the first music I remember was, so when I mentioned this to a friend the other day, when people are like, oh, you know, I grew up and listened to, you know, Miles Davis and you know, like Buddy Rich and all the rest. I was like, what? I listened to like, so as an 8-year-old kid, who's going out and buying Miles Davis albums? Like, your music collection is really your parents' collection. Music collection, and they had quite eclectic music tastes. You know, some of it was fairly straight down the middle. There was like Bread and the Carpenters and Elton John and
ABBA usually in there.
ABBA Gold. You know, who didn't have a copy of that ABBA Gold CD or that tape? You know, we listened to it in cars and all the rest of it. And it was that was what I was brought up on, was the music my parents had. And you know, when I started getting into music at like 11, maybe 12, it was drum teachers. And it was people that I was growing up with who were also playing music, like friends I went to school with who would play guitars. Like, oh my God, there's a band. Look at this tape, the Manic Street Preachers. Have you heard of them? You know, we practice those songs and all the rest of it. But really, I remember like my first So had this big brown Fisher-Price tape recorder thing that was for kids. It was like an indestructible thing, and it had a music on one side, and it was blank the other, so you could record yourself on one side and have this. Looking back at it now, cheesy, insipid music, but that's what I'd listened to when I was an 8-year-old kid. And then when I was about 8, I guess 8, I really wanted to play piano, and my parents found a piano teacher. She was called Roz, and she lived above a petrol station. And I went there for like 8 lessons. I just wanted to play like Beatles tunes. I wanted to play songs and be able to sing and play the piano, and she was more concerned with me sitting up exactly upright and having my posture right and the fingers on the right keys and, the scales and stuff, all of which is important. It's like, you have to teach kids rudiments and stuff. But if sooner or later you don't say, what music are you into? Oh, Foo Fighters. Oh, great. Well, let's play this song. We'll learn this. It's kind of the carrot that you're dangling, isn't it? Yeah. So you can, so you sort of keep them engaged. I didn't want, as an 8-year-old kid, to go and have a meeting about my posture and do scales. I just wanted to play tunes. So I wasn't particularly too interested. And after about 8 or 10 lessons, she met my parents after the lesson downstairs and how did Mark get on today? And she was like, I don't think music's for him. Yeah. I was like, I was so sad. I cried in the car on the way home. My parents were like, oh, don't worry about it. If you don't like it, we don't have to go back. And I'm like, well, I do like it. Just, I couldn't articulate that. I just wanted to play music and not this boring stuff. And then years later, I wanted to play trombone. I thought it was hilarious. I liked the sound of a trombone. It's great for some bizarre reason. And then we went on a holiday, and there was a guy who played drums in the house band who was super cool. And a kid got up one night and played My Girl. He was younger than I was. I must have been 12 at this stage, 12, maybe 13. This kid must have been 10 years old, and he got up and played My Girl, and people just lost their minds. And I was like, Mum, I want to do that. That is so cool. Came back, got a snare drum, a Pearl Export snare drum, and then a year or so later, when we could afford it, got a drum kit for my birthday, secondhand Beverly.
Oh, lovely. You haven't still got it, have you?
No, and I had no idea. I had no idea what I had no idea what I had. Yeah. It was very cool, very cool. Looking back at pictures of it, was like,
I like that. In fact, I have a Beverly snare drum on my kit as we speak.
Right, yeah. So really
Cosmic 21. There it is.
really, really great drums, and I had no idea what I had. I just wanted a big. My teacher played Premiers, and I had a Premier mag. I'd gotten from a drum store. So I was poring over this, and eventually got a Janista. And then the first time I heard like drum workshop stuff when I was like 14, 15, I was like, this is what I want.
Yeah.
And that was it. So that was kind of the early stuff. But really, like the beginning of music was really, it's kind of what your parents are into. And if your parents are lucky enough to be into Miles Davis, well, then good for you. You've lucked out. But the civilian population usually listens to Magic or Heart or Radio 2, and it's fairly centrist in terms of music. It's singer-songwriter stuff or old school rock and roll, and that's what I sort of grew up on. It was only when I started having a sort of proper musical education with teachers and drum magazines that were like, "You've not heard Steely Dan's Asia? You should. Oh, you need to." So I'd save up my paper round money and I'd go out and I'd buy Asia by Steely Dan, and that was my early musical education, is listening to them.
Well, I think I was about 20 before I heard Miles Davis, and I'll be honest, and I'm not going to make any friends by saying this, but I hated it. I thought, I can't listen to this. Now I've got a different appreciation of it. But at the time, when I was listening to Iron Maiden and other similar sort of bands, but
that's it. There's music. Music is my music taste, and my music collection is so wildly eclectic. It's sort of like you can't put my iPod on my iPhone on shuffle, because it'll be Meshuggah one minute, and then John Coltrane the next, and then Tracy Chapman or James Taylor or singer-songwriter stuff, and then it really runs the gambit of just about every musical taste. But in terms of learning music, in terms of you said something there that made me think, yeah, it's about an appreciation for it. I play jazz and I'm okay. I can hold my own. I can have a conversation. I can play jazz. I can play those styles. But if you want a great jazz drummer, you'd hire a great jazz drummer. You wouldn't hire somebody who speaks a bit of jazz.
Yes.
In terms of linguistics, artistically, it's the same as, I can speak Spanish a little bit and a little bit of French. I can get by when I'm there. Like, ¿Dónde está los baños, por favor? Like, where are the toilets? But nobody's going to hire me to be their translator. I speak the language, but I'm not fluent. I speak it like a gringo. Same as 90% of people. You go to Ronnie Scott's and you see people do those late night shows. Those guys speak that language. Yeah. But then you get them to play, with Ed or a pop show, and which is much harder than they think, because it's not about being able to play the beats. It's being able to get inside them and play them the right way. I think we can all agree that, you see Gerald Hayward on a pop gig, and then you put Brian Blade on the same pop gig, and it's just not going to have the same punch, the same impact, the same anything. Conversely, you put Gerald on that jazz gig, and exactly the same reason stylistically in different circumstances. And everybody sort of has their. I pride myself on being a very versatile drummer, but you also know your limits, and it's about appreciation. So, like you said, Miles Davis doesn't set your world alight, and that's fine, and that's okay. That's cool. You can appreciate, same as if you ever. I find wonder in the weirdest things. Like, have you ever seen a guy lay bricks for a wall, like make a wall, build a wall? And they're really good. And they get their brick out and they pick up their mark and they slop it on the thing and they get put just enough on the brick and it looks like they're making no effort at all. Then they'll place the brick, they'll knock it into place, then bang, the next one. And you sit there and it's hypnotic watching them do this.
Plastering's I don't want to be. Plastering's exactly the same.
Oh my God, you see somebody doing proper plastering, proper skimming, and it's like, wow, that is art. You're an artisan. That's very, very special, very cool. Now, I don't want to be a plasterer, but I can appreciate the art in that.
Yeah.
I also don't want to play for Miles Davis, but I can appreciate what Tony, what Elvin, what all those guys did in that genre, and I really appreciate it. But in fact, I had all the Weckl solo albums and all the Vinny solo albums and all this Spyro Gyra, all this real technical fusion stuff. I remember sitting in a car with a girlfriend years and years ago, and it was just after uni, and we were listening to it, and it was really heavy fusion, like all this sort of weird, wacky stuff. And we stopped at some traffic lights. I was like, isn't that cool? Isn't that great? And she was very patient, and she was like, are you listening to this because you like it or because you're impressed by it? And I was like, that's a really good question. What kind of music do you like? What you want to spend your focus on? I'd love to be Weckl, but there are guys that spend 8 hours a day in a room training to be that. And I don't want that enough to do that. And nor do I like it enough to want to do that.
And are there enough gigs to justify that? If they want Weckl, they'll get Weckl generally, won't they? If he's within budget. So
of course, yeah. And like from a sheer, it's not an economics point. Like there are fewer jazz gigs, all of which pay, less than other gigs. But the artistry in it is unlike anything else. There's an old saying, how do you make $1 million playing jazz? You start off with 2 million. You'll lose $1 million before you make one. And it's not only an economics thing, but it's sort of what you're into, what you like. And popular music is called popular music because it's popular and there's a lot of it because people like it. And it's just really what you like, you end up focusing on and being good at and putting your energy and your time into, that kind of thing.
Well, do you know, as a kid, I mean, somebody said it, and I say it myself, I should be much better than I am the amount of time I play. But I remember as a kid, I spent the most of my time reading and learning to read. And that's what I always knew I was going to do, reading gigs. I wasn't going to be anything else. And now I've always got that with me, but I haven't got a chop to my name, and I wouldn't have the balls to use it. I've never needed one. It's horses for courses, and but were you taught to read and You know, were you schooled that way?
Yeah, thankfully I was, and I was into that stuff. As I say, it was really my first proper girlfriend that kind of egged me out of it. But I could play all that stuff, like Hardwired, that first Weckl album. I learned that, and I laboriously scored it out and tried to see. Well, I was in a weird generation. Before me, people were like, "Oh, these old Buddy Rich records." We used to play them on the LPs, and we used to put coins on the record to slow them down so you'd be able to hear the licks. Now you can obviously do that with the internet now, and there are apps for your phone and all the rest of it. And before you could do it with LPs, but I grew up with tapes and CDs, and you couldn't slow that down to figure it out. But my first teacher was very much all about reading, and which is so handy.
Yeah,
I couldn't recommend anybody get into reading highly enough. Just because, well, for a start off, if somebody shows you something in a lesson and then you're not seeing them for another couple of weeks, like, how are you going to remember everything they said?
Yeah.
If it's written down and it's an exercise, then you just look at it and it's like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do. I'm going to nail this. I'm going to work on this until I get it. And that's cool. That's how it's like, and you don't have to read. Certainly the stuff I do, outside of touring, you know, there's studio work and film soundtracks, album work and stuff like that, and theatre shows. They'll hand you a pad, they'll hand you the score, and if you can't read, well, you go home and you won't work with them again, and that's sort of it. So it doesn't make any sense to me that you wouldn't read. And well, it's like reading, like not music, but reading a book, or reading the paper, or reading signs walking down the street. You don't have to read. Nobody has to read. I mean, you know, if you don't want to read a book, you don't read a book, and you don't have to read. You can get by. Sorry, what does that say? I haven't got my glasses. You can make an excuse for not reading.
Of course.
You might even not want to read, but it's pretty handy, isn't it? Being able to read, like, then you know stuff, and you can look at magazines, and you can look at information, and read stories, and do all that sort of stuff. It's the same with drums. You don't have to read, but if you do, your world completely opens up. And if you become a good reader, your world opens up exponentially, and you can end up doing gigs on which you're required to read. You know, we did a Marvel film, Air, and you walk in and there's 88 chairs up for an orchestra, and they're like, okay, guys, it goes like this, right? Listen. What? You know, those 88 people all have to be on the same page, and they're reading the same music, they're reading their parts, and they have to correlate with one another. You can't not read and do that sort of session. So it's I think it's wildly important. And it's people who are self-taught invariably don't self-teach themselves to read, but it's a skill you can pick up. Just buy a book, go into a music shop and pick up a book on music theory, or just pay for a couple of lessons with a drum teacher and just get it under your belt. And it's so wildly important for what I do.
Incredibly useful tool. And I don't really do any non-reading gigs. I'm too lazy to rehearse. I just say, oh, is it parts? Is it click? Yeah, okay, I'll do the gig. It's fine.
Yeah.
And then if I make a mess of it, I know it's my own fault. Then I've misread something, or I've missed a page or a repeat or something like that. But I like the thrill of going in and not having a clue how it's going to go. And it must be like that. I mean, we were talking the other day, and you've done the soundtrack, or part of the soundtrack and it's going to be huge for the Wicked. Well, I say, is it a series of films? There's 2 films coming out eventually, I believe. Is that right?
I think you're right. Yeah. So yeah, for the it's got Jeff Goldblum and Ariana Grande, and a really stellar cast. And yeah, so different movies are made in different ways. So, you know, you'll do like that the Marvel movie I mentioned, and other movies. You'll go in and it'll be scored. So it'll be soundtrack. It'll be overture. So you'll do the theme of the movie, like Jurassic Park. You know, the orchestra will record that, and then there'll be incidentals. So it'll be like there'll be a chase scene, and you'll record that, and the score, basically the underscore. And then on certain movies, we just did a Matt Damon movie the year before last, just the first thing out of COVID I did.
Okay.
And there was like a drone scene, or a scene of this. It was supposed to be a helicopter flying over these hills, but it was a drone that had taken this epic shot of like the Great Wall of China, and a bunch of other stuff. And Matt Damon was a producer or an exec or something to do with it. And they basically wanted sound design. Mm-hmm. So it wasn't score, it wasn't music, but it was sort of like, oh, we need something big and drummy here. So we've got these massive, great big taiko drums and these huge tam-tams and like so it was like, you know, and you and the producer on the session and the and maybe a music supervisor and a composer will all be in the studio going, we need this to sound big, something like jigga-digga-dim. And you'll go in and you'll try a bunch of it. Yeah, great. Can you make it tail off at the end, or can you make it big? And that is really interesting because that's not scored.
No,
that's interpretive stuff, and it's sound design basically.
Yeah.
But playing drums and using them as effects and making something rhythmic, like there's an army trooping down a beach or something, and they'll need a snare drum in the faint distance or whatever. And yeah, and then. Of course, so that's several parts of making a single movie.
Sure.
And then each movie is different from movie to movie. Like I did the Elton John biopic Rocketman, and that took about, in music terms, about 2.5 years, wow. Something like that. So because it's a biopic and it's a musical, if you like, there are songs in it. It's like watching a theatre show almost. There were huge choreographed numbers to those songs. Mm-hmm. And of course, when they're filming them, even when they're rehearsing them, they're building up how this is going to happen. You know, I was on set for some of it. And they're like, okay, we've got to work out how we're going to, you know, do this Elton John tune and the dance to it. But we need something to get us from this doorway over to that part where he jumps in a car and then there's a big smash and then the musical number starts. So you'll have to figure out a way to add an extra 2 bars into a song, or you'll have to play something or record something, almost kind of like a demo of how it's going to be, so that they can take that demo to the set and the dancers can rehearse to it, and then they can cut the movie to it. So they can film the scene. And then, of course, once the scene's in the can, you go back into the studio and you record the music properly. It might be good enough, it might need augmenting, or it might need doing completely again. And then, of course, on those movies, there's the score stuff. You know, she looks wistfully out of a window. So there's that stuff as well. And that's what's been happening on the Wicked movie. It's way away from finishing, but we've had to go in and do some sessions on the like some soundtrack stuff. So there's a song called The Wizard and I, and
oh yes, I know that one.
Yeah,
a tricky little tune to get through that. Yeah, tricky, that one.
So I'm talking about reading. There's reading and then there's reading.
Yes.
And that one, because of the time changes and
tempo changes.
Tempo changes, there's rubato. You know, it's like, it's proper. It goes from pillar to post. And yeah, well, of course, Jeff Goldblum needs something to dance to, and Ariana needs something to sing to, and all the rest of it. So that's already happened on the stage, and then they'll do the scoring stuff. They're going to need to do trailers for these movies. So long before the soundtrack's done, they need to eke the movie out. And you know, that's what's happened so far on that one.
Absolutely fascinating. It really is. And you've done the Amy Winehouse biopic as well, which some great music in there. I mean, you probably can't say too much about it, but again, it's not out, I believe, until next year. So was the songs that are involved in it, were they pretty much faithful to the originals, or were they, well, there's some beautiful stuff to play?
Yeah, that's a great question. And what they were looking to do is to get the original guys in that were in her band to do some of it.
Mm-hmm.
And they've done some of it, and you know, they needed sort of studio guys to do other stuff, or to redo some bits, or for whatever reason, you know, they all of a sudden found out that, it needs to be 2 minutes 20 seconds instead of 1 minute 40 seconds or whatever. So we came in and we did a lot. So in that one, if I remember correctly, there was that again runs the gambit. So there's a scene where she goes into Ronnie Scott's or somewhere, a jazz club, and there's a piano there, and it's a part of the story that she just starts singing the song. Basically, she starts singing this song on a piano, and then the band join in. So we did that. We did. There was a performance that she did at V Festival called "It's a Rude Word," F Me Pumps, which was a song about whatever. And because it was a gig that they had done at Tea in the Park, and there will be a scene in the movie of events that unfolded backstage at Tea in the Park. So we had to recreate that live version. So this is also where transcription came in. I mean, whoever was playing drums on that was playing outside of the box. It wasn't just playing the groove. Mm-hmm. There were loads of little fills and splashes and sort of the sort of R&B kind of gospel-y kind of drums. So I scored every minute detail out so I could play it exactly like it was in the. I mean, my manuscript paper that I took into the session, for that particular song, looked like somebody had spilt an inkwell on it and the spider had walked through it, and there was blobs everywhere. But we did the session and we A/B'd them, and it was like, yeah, that's exactly how we went. Even the little offbeat splashes and the little, the way the hi-hat opening, the minutiae, the detail, that it's important that stuff gets recaptured and recreated. And a person who is scoring a movie won't put that level of detail into the drum score if you should get one. They'll be like groove, 8 bars, repeat, chorus, open hats, but the little minutiae, I find it really important to detail that. So there was that. There were live recreations. There was like the one in Ronnie Scott's, which is a bit of artistic license. It probably happened, maybe not like that. Mm-hmm. And then score stuff, and then basically recreating what was on original albums. So yeah, that is wildly interesting. It's my favorite thing to do, I think, the movie stuff, because it varies. It varies completely. It's great walking in and doing. And there are guys. We talked about this briefly the other day. There are guys like Ralph Salmons, Neil Wilson, Ian Thomas, who are my heroes of mine, really. I mean, I used to sneak into jazz clubs to watch them play when I was underage, like a kid, and they are so good at that stuff. And there's Frank Ricotti, percussionist, who nobody outside of that world really knows too much about. I mean, but I've never heard anybody play a pressed roll just so well to make it go like, it's so wildly seamless and impressive. But nobody's writing about them in drum magazines and on forums and all this sort of stuff. But such incredible players who do that job day in, day out. I love doing it, and I love the challenges it brings up, and I like the working together with the sound design stuff that I was talking about earlier. Like, we need this to seem dramatic, and we need this to seem pensive. Or the director will be there with the composer, and they'll be talking in the control room about, like, yeah, it's good, it just sounds a bit dull. Okay, cool. So maybe if I play this with beaters, don't play it with beaters, but play it with sticks, or play it with nylon tips, or with, like, I've got some metallic beads drumsticks. It's like they're looking for ultimate attack, and they're looking for something really piercing and cutting. So all this sort of stuff, and the emotional intelligence it takes to get inside their minds and try and deliver what they want. So, and it's the same on sessions. You'll have singer-songwriters who they won't speak drums. They won't be like, oh, can you use a sizzle cymbal on this? Or, like, I want you to use like a medium heavy ride, or I want you to use a paper thin K, like something really dark and wobbly. But they will speak to you in terms of what they want.
Like color almost.
Color, exactly that. Exactly. Oh, this feels a bit yellow. Okay, yellow. That's not as stupid as it sounds, because what's yellow? Well, it's bright, it's sprightly, it's playful, maybe yellow. It's not terracotta, which is a sort of reddy, dark brown, earthy, which if somebody said to you, play terracotta, you'd be like, what are you talking about? But think about it, it's dark. So you wouldn't have splash cymbals, and you wouldn't be playing with nylon tip sticks, on heavy rides. You'd be playing dark sounds, big toms with coated heads, big wobbly warm cymbals with mallet. That's it. Yeah, that's it. So you'd be playing, it takes emotional intelligence to get inside their heads and be like, okay, I don't know exactly what you're looking for, but I reckon I've got a pretty good idea of a starting point. And from there they'll go, that's it. Or they'll go, yeah, kind of, but that's too much. That's too sizzly, or that's too bright. And then you mitigate, or mediate what you've done to try and satisfy their needs.
And let's be honest, you need to be quite a confident character as well to be able to pull that off, don't you? You can't be a wallflower and just go, oh, well, you've got to be able to deliver that. And I think, obviously, this is why you're getting booked again and again, over and over and over. You're only a very part way through your career, and who knows what's ahead. But you've got to be assertive, haven't you? And give them what.
Yeah. Well, at least if you're not, because not everybody has that character. You've got to be steadfast in your desire to give them what they want.
Yes.
You could be quiet and shy and retiring. And not be gregarious and walk into the studio like, hey guys, how's it going? Like, yeah, let's get you some great sounds. I don't know exactly what you want. You could be like, oh, okay, I really want to get this right for you. Like, do you mind bearing with me? And I'll try this. And if you have that emotional intelligence, if you have that in your musical lexicon to know kind of what people are after, then you can still deliver it. But yeah, it certainly helps to be. It's communication.
Of course it is. Yeah.
Really. It's with any relationship, with romantic relationships, with musical relationships, with work colleagues. If you don't communicate and you aren't either articulate enough to explain in minutia what you want, or you're not emotionally intelligent enough to sense what somebody wants. If somebody sat in the corner of a room like looking sort of really woeful and twiddling their thumbs and stuff, it's like, they're not happy, are they? They're probably sad.
Yeah.
So you've got enough emotional intelligence to read people and to tell if they're not the most articulate, or they can't express themselves in the way they want, that you are still able to deliver what you think it requires and what they want. And if you're able to do that, they'll ring you again the next time they need something done.
Yeah, which is important. Look, well, time has beaten us, sadly, Mark. And I have to say thank you so much for giving up your time in your very busy schedule. I know you're all over the place, so I really appreciate it, mate. I really do. Have a
nothing to do. We got to sit and talk about drums and music.
We probably haven't scratched the surface, to be fair. But hey, maybe a part 2 when you're not quite as busy. Who knows?
I'm in. If I get a chance to hang with like-minded people and drummers and talk about drums and music, then anytime I'm free and you need anything, just give us a ring. If I can do it, I will, for sure, because it's
always up for that. Always. To be fair, I wouldn't do a drummers podcast if I wasn't. So, the inner geek is well and truly out. But
yeah. It's a family, isn't it? It's a family affair. It's like everybody's on the, everybody's. I don't think I've never met anybody who's really like, yeah, I'm sort of into drums a little bit. It's all or nothing. If you're into it, you see the value in it, and you're really into it.
100%. Well, so look, enjoy the rest of the tour. I hope it's as successful as I know it will be. Of course, have a great gig tonight, and thanks once again, mate. And I'll see you soon, hopefully.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real pleasure. Cheers, mate.
Likewise. Cheers, Mark. See you now. Bye-bye. Awesome.